It feels like every day on the show, we're talking about the fate of American democracy, the possibility of World War III, the rise of the global tech oligarchy shaping our dystopian future. You know, the light stuff, the little things, but also, life on this planet and in this country. It was still plenty fucked up when we were spending more time talking about internet drama. And one place that is long and continues to be the case is the US healthcare system. And that's actually something we've seen John Ossoff, one of my Democratic senators from Georgia, really honing in on.
If the Trump administration wants to take the position that they're going to defend the insurance industry, then I think they'll pay a heavy cost at the ballot box.
Right, and last week, he announced that he'd be investigating insurance companies denying claims and delaying medically necessary healthcare, writing a letter asking for answers from Mehmet Oz, right, Dr. Oz, the former talk show host, failed politician, and now current administrator for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. With Ossoff saying the improper use of prior authorization where patients must seek approval from their insurance company before receiving care has led to Georgians being denied life-saving medication and others who have been forced to wait months to get the care they need, all at the whim of insurance companies. And he then went on to say, challenges navigating prior authorization practices are not unique to Georgia. And in his letter, Ossoff also highlighted the work of KFF, a nonprofit that's focused on health policy research. And actually, in one of its latest polls, it found that prior authorizations rank as the public's biggest burden when getting healthcare. And you also had insured people reporting a whole bunch of other issues navigating the healthcare system, with their biggest economic concern being the cost of healthcare. But, for today, we're going to stick with prior authorizations because this is overlooked. You see, about a third of insured adults in the US, they say that they find prior authorizations as a major burden to getting healthcare. And another almost 40% found it to be at least a minor burden. So that means that around 70% of people find the process burdensome in some way. That's more than the percentage of people who reported issues with understanding bills or what's owed, getting needed appointments, or finding providers who accept their insurance. Also, around 40% of insured adults with a chronic condition say prior authorizations are the single biggest burden when it comes to getting healthcare. And that's a big number and group we got to focus on because these are likely people who are interacting with the healthcare system, including health insurance companies, more frequently. But also, either way, whatever group you single out, this seems to be the case, right? People with employer-sponsored insurance, people who purchase their own insurance, people on Medicaid, Democrats, Republicans, independents, for all of them, the most common answer to the question, what is the single biggest burden when it comes to getting healthcare, was prior authorization. And that may be because during the prior authorization process, some treatments or medications recommended by a provider may get delayed if the insurance company doesn't just outright deny coverage. But according to this poll, a whole third of insured adults say they've had a health insurance company deny coverage for a certain healthcare service, treatment, or medication prescribed by their doctor in the past 2 years. And some of those who may have to deal with this over and over again are the roughly 35 million people that are enrolled in what's known as Medicare Advantage plans. And actually, just to explain here, Medicare is a federal health insurance program primarily for people age 65 or older, as well as younger individuals with certain disabilities. And Medicare Advantage is a Medicare-approved alternative offered by private insurance companies. And almost everyone enrolled in this type of plan is required to obtain prior authorization for some services, especially higher cost services, things like inpatient hospital stays, skilled nursing facility stays, and chemotherapy. And with KFF finding that Medicare Advantage insurers made nearly 53 million prior authorization determinations in 2024, more than 4 million of which were fully or partially denied. And then with those denials, very notably, only around 11% appealed. So that makes you wonder, well, how many people were just left without coverage simply because the appeals process was too difficult? And so in this letter, you had Ossoff arguing, it's far easier for insurance companies to deny services than for patients to navigate this burdensome process. And that's especially a problem because at least those Medicare Advantage denials, they were fully or partially overturned in more than 80% of appeals. And so with KFF writing, these requests represent medical care that was ordered by a healthcare provider and ultimately deemed necessary, but was potentially delayed because of the additional step of appealing the initial prior authorization decision. Such delays may have negative effects on a patient's health, which, yeah, you don't say. And to be clear, there is evidence to back up that claim. A study from Johns Hopkins University earlier this year, for example, found that authorization requirements were associated with disease exacerbation, preventable hospitalization, prolonged hospital stay, and lower rates of disease-free survival. Also, according to a 2024 survey from the American Medical Association, physicians deal with an average of 39 prior authorizations every week, requiring 13 hours of work. And 93% of them also reported that prior authorization delays necessary care, and 82% said that it results in patients abandoning necessary services. And also a big thing to note here is this is an issue that policymakers have long been aware of. In fact, a 2024 federal regulation required certain insurers to publicly report certain metrics related to prior authorization requests. And the deadline for the first set of data covering 2025 was March 31st, 2026. And you've since had KFF getting into and claiming the data actually offers little insight into who gets approved or denied, saying there's no consistent way to find the data on insurers' websites and saying it's not broken down in ways that are actually useful. And then there are also similar concerns about companies finding ways around whatever gets thrown at them next. Like last summer, for example, you actually had the Trump administration legislation announcing that dozens of health insurers had signed a pledge to reform prior authorization, vowing to limit the types of claims that require pre-approval, lower wait times, and explain it better to patients when denying a request. But patients, advocates, and providers, they all expressed doubt that companies will effectively follow through on their promises. Now that said, bipartisan legislation has also been introduced in both the House and Senate. And actually just last week, CMS released a proposed rule that would apparently aim to streamline the process of getting prior authorization for prescription drugs. And then also, there's a lot of action at the state level, with at least half of all state legislatures taking up bills related to prior authorization just this year. Right, a lawmaker in Minnesota, for example, brought forward a bill to ban the use of artificial intelligence for making denial decisions on prior authorizations. And then the governor of West Virginia, he actually signed a bill passed unanimously by the state legislature last month. And what that one would do is let people with a plan from the state's public employees insurance agency who have been approved for a course of treatment to pursue an alternative medically appropriate treatment of equal or lesser value without the need of another prior authorization. And if that long sentence, it sounds extremely specific, that's for a reason. Right, that law came into effect after a man by the name of Eric Tennant died following a long battle not just with cancer, but with his health insurer over whether or not the treatment recommended by his doctor would be covered, with his insurer, Public Employees Insurance Agency, repeatedly denying him coverage of a non-invasive cancer treatment that would have used ultrasound waves to target and maybe shrink the largest tumor in his liver. And while his family, they didn't expect the procedure to totally get rid of the cancer, they reportedly hoped that it would give him a little more time and ease his pain. But the insurer, they said that the procedure was not medically necessary and that it was considered experimental and investigational. And while the insurer eventually switched its decision, notably after Eric's case was reported on by KFF and NBC, by then it was too late. Within 1 week of that reversal in late May, he was hospitalized. His health had just kept getting worse, and by the middle of the summer, he was no longer considered a suitable candidate for the procedure, and he died a short time later. And so with that heartbreaking story just being one of God knows how many, and the whole situation just being so infuriating and ridiculous, we needed to hear from John Ossoff directly, and that's exactly what we're gonna do right after this quick break. Do you ever send an email and then you get ads about it like 5 minutes later? Because yeah, that's not a coincidence. And this is specifically about your email, not your browsing, not your apps, your inbox. Because most email services, they're not just delivering your emails, they're scanning them. And that's why today's sponsor, Proton Mail, is worth paying attention to. Proton Mail was built by scientists in Switzerland with one goal: make privacy the default, not the upgrade. Instead of your data being the product, your emails are protected with zero access encryption, meaning only you and your recipient can read them. And yeah, that also means no targeted ads based on stuff you literally just emailed about. And one of the things I like is that it's not one of those secure but unusable tools. It's clean and easy to use. You can organize your inbox automatically, remove subscriptions you don't need, and even create email aliases so you're not handing out your real address everywhere. And hey, if you're worried about switching, it's simple. You just import your old emails or start fresh with a new address. Your choice. And email is one of the last places people forget about privacy, and honestly, that makes no sense. You can sign up for Proton Mail for free right now. Just head to proton.me/Philip DeFranco or scan that QR code. That's proton.me/Philip DeFranco to get started today. With that said, let's jump into it with John Ossoff. Something you mentioned as far as investigations, I'm very interested now because you just opened an investigation into insurance companies denying care. Can you walk me through that?
Yeah, this is a huge issue in Georgia and across the country. I mean, and a few stories from Georgia that illustrate this. A retired teacher who paid for years into a cancer policy, paid like over $100,000 into this cancer policy, gets diagnosed with cancer, and then her claims for treatment are denied. There's a story about, these are true stories, a story about a Georgia woman who was diagnosed with bile duct cancer. And she's told she has like 6 to 12 months to live. She may have to say goodbye to her children. She's getting her affairs in order, but what she needs is a liver transplant. And she gets everything arranged, gets on the transplant list, only to have her insurance company tell her that they're not going to cover it. And so then she has to spend months of what might be the final months of her life fighting with the insurance company and finding some other way to get a liver. I mean, thousands of Georgia children who have had insurance companies deny them healthcare that they need, sometimes with devastating consequences. In the wealthiest country in the world, no one should be denied needed healthcare or delayed needed healthcare by a wildly profitable insurance industry when premiums are just going up and up and up, especially since the Republicans refused to extend Affordable Care Act benefits. It's not right, and it's something we've got to deal with urgently.
And so, I mean, with that specifically, 80% of denials, we were looking into it, that get appealed are overturned. So from what you're seeing, does it look like the denial itself is the business model? It's not some sort of fracture and that they're just banking on people not fighting back?
I think that statistic, and I'm glad that you pulled that out, demonstrates just how abusive this can be. Because yes, in some of these cases, like 80% of the appeal. So just to walk everyone through this, the request for care is denied. And then there can be an appeal. And in some of these types of insurance, 80% of the appeals are granted, but only a very small number of the denials are appealed, because you got to know how to do that. You got to know that you can. You got to be willing to deal with the massive headache of fighting a vast, powerful insurance company that has all these resources at its disposal. And when you're in a health crisis, that's like the last thing that you want to be worrying about, should be worrying about. So I think that there's clear evidence of abuse, and it's something that needs to be investigated by the Congress, and it needs to be dealt with.
And regarding methods, right? Insurance companies are now using AI to determine if someone can get the medication they're prescribed. Do you think that an algorithm should ever be allowed to deny cancer treatment? And part of my question there is because we're seeing places like Minnesota, they want to ban insurers from using AI to auto-deny claims. Do you believe that that should be a federal law?
Well, it raises the question about the transparency of the underlying algorithm and technology. Is the tool being used to understand the underlying health issue? Or is the tool being used to maximize profitability for the insurer and try to deny as many claims as possible right up to the limit of existing law or the terms of the policy in order to improve margins? And that has to be a part of this inquiry.
And for a Georgian that is dealing with a prior authorization denial right now, what does your investigation actually change for them?
Well, in order for us to make effective law, we have to do the difficult work of investigating what's going on. I mean, the law that I passed to deal with the civil rights crisis and the corruption crisis in our federal prisons, the Federal Prison Oversight Act, that's a bipartisan law that I wrote and passed. And the way that we laid the groundwork to do that was over a year of investigative work in the Senate, getting testimony under oath from people about what was happening in America's prisons, gathering the necessary expertise to make a good law to address it. And so this is the basic, essential work necessary for us to defend the public interest.
Well, I guess what would you say to people who say, this has been broken for years? In the past, you did have the White House. Why wasn't it fixed then?
Well, look, there's always more work to do to advance the interests of the American people. I mean, that I don't think is a reason not to do it, not to pursue it, particularly where we see increasingly that people identify this as the number one impediment to getting health care and the number one dissatisfaction with the healthcare system. This is clearly an issue that cries out for action. And so I'm taking that action.
Right. And I mean, it is very obviously connected to affordability. It's one of the biggest ways that Americans are put into bankruptcy. And so I guess with that, with this letter that you're sending to Dr. Oz, he has kind of every incentive to ignore you. So I guess one, what is your actual leverage here? And two, what are you looking to realistically accomplish or get from it?
Well, I've asked him a series of very specific questions about how CMS tracks rates of denial, legitimacy of denial, data about the success of appeals by those who appeal those denials for individual insurance companies. And I expect him to provide that information to my office. And so far, I've not seen any evidence of obstruction. If obstruction materializes, then we'll deal with that and we'll apply public pressure. But this is an issue that is of concern, not just to Democrats across the country. This is like an 80-20 or 90-10 issue among the American people. The American people do not believe that people should have necessary health care denied or delayed by insurance companies. If the Trump administration wants to take the position that they're going to defend the insurance industry, then I think they'll pay a heavy cost at the ballot box.
And so with all of this, first, let me say thank you to John Ossoff for the time. And then two, I want to thank you, the viewer, the beautiful bastard. Thank you for watching, liking, subscribing to this channel, maybe even sharing this video. You don't get to have the longest running news show on the internet without having a badass audience. So thank you for being a part of my day today, which on that note, maybe I'll see you right back here in a few hours for today's second video, your regularly scheduled Philip DeFranco show. I love your faces. See you then.